Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits and happy Hanukkah! Tonight we are going to go for a really dark, saturated colorway using a navy, deep purple and black and mixing them together to have something that has a lot of variation in it, but the depth of tone should still be very pigmented. At least that is our goal and my vision for the yarn. Now, to help us get some success with this and to not have any patches that are too light, I am going to dye this yarn in 2 stages. First, we are going to do some cool vat dyeing to get a gray base on what is otherwise our bare yarn. And then we will be over dyeing it, which on one hand might make it a little harder for us to see where we're placing colors, but on the other, we know we're not going to accidentally have some white patches left behind because we will have added some coverage already to begin with. So let's go get started with our first round of dyeing. This is a 5-gallon bucket and I filled it mostly full, maybe it'll be too full, and overflow as I add our yarn. But oh, that's satisfying. Oh, that is so satisfying. I just added 90 10-gram mini skeins to this bucket to pre-soak, and I am excited. Wow, not only do we splash them out, but the yarn pulls up a lot of liquid. Wild. Okay, I am gonna leave this in here to pre-soak for 20 to 30 minutes, and I am going to place a cover lightly on the bucket just to keep anything from falling in there. These are the 3 colors I plan to use. We'll see if I still remember that in a couple of days, but we are going to start with just the true black today to create our base color. Now, if you go back and look at Dye Pot Weekly 117, the math of yarn dyeing, I did multiple depths of shade of this toner black. And the color that I'm going for right now is actually the lightest shade, the 0.25% depth of shade, which would be a 1/4 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. And since we have 900 grams of yarn today, we're going to want 2.25 grams of dye. So I'm now going to go and measure that out and dissolve it. While dealing with the dye powder, I wore a respirator mask with P100 filters, safety glasses, and gloves to avoid inhaling any powder. Please, please, please make sure you wear a particle mask when dealing with dye powders. I measured out the 2.25 grams of true black and then started mixing it with warm tap water to dissolve it. The final volume of water here doesn't matter because all of this dye is going to go onto the yarn at some point anyway, but you know, I tried to keep it under 1 liter total just so that way I could easily transport it outside to another 5-gallon bucket. What's funny today is that this is easily the largest volume of yarn I have ever dyed in one pot, but it is not the most dye I've ever put into a massive thing of yarn to dye that yarn, because I've done 2% depth of shade for more skeins than what I'm doing right now. But anyway, I just thought that that was interesting. And so now let's go set up our dye bath. I want reasonable coverage on the yarn, but I'm not worried about it being perfectly even, if that makes sense. This 5-gallon bucket is about half full. The only thing I wish is that the bucket that I got was white, so then I would know more if it was going to stain. But now I'm adding in our dye and just stirring it around. I don't really want to splash, but stirring it around until all of it is in the pot. And now we can add our yarn. I've got all 900 grams. Lifting them up. These reusable nylon zip ties are so useful. Some dyers like shower rings, but I find these zip ties to be fantastic, and I do have an affiliate link to them down in the video description. All right, and now we're gonna add it to our dye. And you can see there is a lot of pigment in here. Even if it's dip dyed and not perfectly even, I am fine with that. But now I'm gonna go get some vinegar so that way we can actually have this color starting to set. I've got 300 milliliters of white vinegar here, which is a bit over 1 cup. And I'm adding it to our bucket, and we'll be able to check in and see how things are going. But don't forget that this is just the first round of dyeing that we are doing for this colorway. We will be over dyeing it with black and navy and purple. This is just giving us a base, which is a beautiful medium toned gray. And I am stirring things up just by lifting and lowering the yarn, and I'm happy to say there's no splashing. And so now that we're well mixed, I am ready to leave the yarn for a few days. It's currently about 11 a.m. on a Sunday. I'm not sure how long we are going to leave it, but we'll leave it outside and let that color slowly absorb. I could do this on the stovetop to have faster turnaround, but if you have limited time for each of the steps, this is something that can be really handy and should work really, really well. So I'll be back in a couple of days and we'll check and see. A couple of days isn't necessarily necessary. A few hours or really overnight might be enough time for all of the dye to absorb. It's not that much dye, but since black is such a pigmented color, there is still a lot in there. But setting up a cool vat or doing some solar dyeing or something like this, letting your yarn have time to sink in that color before you heat set it or do the next round is a way that you can easily manage to dye more yarn, especially if you have a smaller setup like what I have, where I have one stovetop. I don't have a lot of capacity to heat a lot of yarn at once. And so this breaking it down makes some multi-step processes more manageable. And this is something that I hope to do a lot more in the future. And the benefit is that you can get really even color coverage this way. Now, I haven't tried a 5-gallon bucket before, but there's a lot of space in there. I could have fit more than 900 grams. And so that is really exciting for me. One other note is that once this yarn is ready, I'm not gonna rinse it, I'm not gonna wash it. We're gonna go ahead and dye it directly. And that is a perk for us today because we'll be heating it as we add the other color. And so, yeah, just wanted to point that out as well. It is now Tuesday morning. I have not opened up the bucket. We've had some hot days. Today is going to be pretty stormy and a bit cooler, but I'm hoping this evening to be able to bring it inside and dye the colorway. I would bring it in earlier to just rinse the yarn if I was going to dry it at this stage, but since we're going to dye it again, I want to make sure I have adequate time to dye these 9 skeins of yarn. I have not peeked or opened this bucket yet. Ooh, hoo, hoo, hoo. This is a beautiful deep gray color already. And given that I want to go so deep and dark, oh, that water is so clear. That is amazing. Given that I want to go so deep and dark, this is really, really awesome as a starting place because then I'm not going to worry as much as all the white left behind. Ooh, but we do have some unevenness. I did not perfectly mix it. I don't know if you can see because from the sun. So we've got some pale gray in there. But again, this is something that's going to be easier for me to account for, and I can make sure that the pale section is on top. So right now I'm going to take 3 skeins and go put it in a catering steam pan. And I'm going to set these other 6 aside. As for this remaining dye bath, I'm going to reuse this water. Right now I am bringing in 300 grams more yarn, 1 DK and 2 fingering to soak, because this is acidic water, and we will use these as yarn mops for the course of the video. But this way we don't need to use more acid because we've got it there. How awesome. This is a full-size 4-inch deep catering steam pan, and I'm going to be arranging these skeins so that, and this has some light on both sides, but I'm going to aim to have a lighter section on top to start with. Because as things get wet, it'll be a little harder for me to determine where the light and dark is located. But man, these are actually gorgeous tonals already. The balance may not be great because it might be, the light might be all on one side, but I'm not that fussed about it because these skeins are all going to be turned into mini skeins anyway. But it's worth keeping in mind that when I go back and look at how I set this up with 9 skeins, we did not get a semi-solid, we got these beautiful tonals. If I wanted the yarn to be more solid, then I should have let this sit with the dye for a longer period of time, making sure to stir it frequently and make sure the volume in the water was absolutely as high as possible. And then come and add the acid. I'm now coming in with 6 cups of plain tap water. This gives us a really nice sort of low coverage. I'm going to turn on the heat. I'm not adding additional acid yet. I will be adding additional acid as things go on, but there's already acid in the yarn. I don't remember how much, but it is there. Let's start in with the deep purple. I'm going in fairly heavy. We will be spreading this out in a little bit. But I want to go in both on some areas that are paler and also some that are deeper. And as I go through, I'll be taking my gloves and wiping this onto the yarn mop. This deep purple that I just used looks fairly brown until you apply heat. So it is absolutely more purple than that. But the color has surprised me in the past. Okay, let's bring out the color. Whoa. So I'm not just sure if it's the heat, but at first it looks broken, and maybe it's that brownness that I was telling you about. Or maybe it's when it's got access to acid. I am not 100% sure. But yeah, there you go. It's all getting more deep purple versus this reddish brown hue that we see at first. And what I'm doing is really just tapping it out, helping it move through. But I could say I can see the color on all of the yarn where I have placed it so far. And so that is good. I'm now coming in, and I'm going to reduce the heat to low. I'm coming in with some dark navy. Again, we're being pretty heavy and a little bit random with the placement because I like to be random with where I put colors. Okay. I'm going to come in with the black in a moment. It is very important that your hands are completely dry before you go into the powder, because you don't want to introduce moisture into the jars. And I am wearing gloves, a respirator mask, and safety glasses while I am dealing with these dry powders. And so this is where you're going to start to see where some of this gray in here will help, because at the interface of these colors, if there's some areas that don't get a lot of coverage, it's okay because This is so pretty. It's okay if there's some areas that don't get very much coverage because we're not going to see that white. There might still be some contrast, but the overall yarn should be fairly saturated. But we will try to move things through really nicely. And now I'm going to come in with some true black and going in especially on these areas where I still see color. And I mean, okay, that's silly. I see color everywhere, but where I still see more gray. So there's not as much black, but I guess why not do a little bit light all around? Why not? Oof. And wiping the excess dye over on my yarn mop. And we'll be using the same mop probably for one whole pan, but we'll see. I'm waiting a little bit of time, but I'm not waiting a ton of time before I come through to help this color move, because I'm hoping that we will see it penetrating down, because we're now actually hitting a stage where it is harder for me to tell what's going on beneath the surface. I mean, if I move it, you know, we definitely have some grays down there, but on camera you can kind of see we've got these deep colors all working together, and it is very, very beautiful. And I can even move it over. I am curious. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to full on move this yet, but what I think I want to do is add a little bit of acid. 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. I'm going to let this sit for 15 minutes. We're back. I did check the color at one point, but it has actually mostly absorbed now. I think the colors are a bit more blown out. Yeah, look at my arm on camera, but that really does help you see the variation of color. And oh good, we got some nice penetration of color to the other side. And as we dye the reverse side, the plan is again to look for the lightest areas, the less deep saturated areas that we see on the yarn, whether it's completely on the reverse side or what. So some of that gray in there being left behind is perfectly acceptable to me. Starting with the deep purple and then the dark navy and true black, I added more color onto the yarn. And again, we were going for dark coverage, and it's hard to tell after adding the black how much of that navy and purple are going to remain in the yarn. But again, things will look less dark once they are dry, and I do see some hints of those colors in there. As I was going through, I continued to wipe my hands on the yarn mop, which started to get some really, really beautiful coverage. I knew that I was going to want to do one more round of flipping and adding color, but even after just that second round, I was very satisfied. And I did wait about 15 minutes in between moving things again, especially checking around those ties, to add more of these 3 dark colors. But I am so excited. This is awesome. There's still a potential for me to find some hidden lighter patches in here, but I'm less worried than I would have been if I had started with a white base. If I had a white base, I think that as I flipped, I would find more pastels, but starting with that medium gray color really, really helped. Our yarn mop is looking gorgeous. I like the darks with the pops of light, and I'm going to go ahead and steam set this for 20 minutes off camera. And what I'm going to do for this yarn now is I'm going to add 8 cups of water. So that way there is plenty of space for all of the yarn to move around. There should be plenty of acid in here, but this should help anything unbound, any pockets that could be trapped that I wasn't moving, absorb. I did not wait any time between the last time I added dye and this stage, but I think now I'm going to bring this up and increase the temperature until it gets warm again, and then let it heat for about 20 minutes before turning off the heat and letting the yarn cool. The heat has now been off for a little while, and all of the color is in our yarn. And I see deep hints of purple and black and gray, and this is beautiful. I'm now going to set it aside so it can finish cooling, and then we will wash it. But first, I guess we'll go ahead and dye the rest of the yarn off camera. As for our yarn mop, we will make 2 more like this as we go through, but I'm also going to set this aside so we can wash it. As I went to go start washing our yarn, I noticed something odd. The length of these skeins is really, really different. What? They are all platinum. These are all platinum soft. It must just be that the newest bag I got has a different length to it, because there's no way that the yarn shrunk like that much. That's absurd. But anyway, we are now washing in some clear tap water, and I am not seeing any signs of bleeding, which is always awesome when a color is this pigmented. I'm now adding some dish soap. The length is something that I can test out easily enough. I have some skeins from these older bags and from the new, I think, in one of my bins. I have a feeling that they just changed the way that they skein the yarn, but that is wild. All right, I'm seeing maybe the barest hint of color, but compared to the amount of color in here, that is not much. That could just be some residual color on these ties. But anyway, I'm gonna go rinse this a few more times and go check this length issue, because now I'm curious. I checked my stash and I didn't notice a difference. I did have one bag of platinum sock from, goodness, years ago, and I'm not sure which container it ended up with, but I know that the Leave No Dye Behind skein is absolutely new. Did we get an absurd amount of shrinkage? I don't know, but we'll compare the lengths of this once it is dry, because again, I am perplexed, but at least there's no bleeding. So I am perplexed. Going through the dry skeins, I did not see like a massive size difference between the bag that I just opened for that yarn mop and some others that I'd set aside, but most skeins were newer, and I don't know in which of the bins I put the slightly older ones. I didn't really keep track of that. So either they changed the length of their skeins, but it's in both DK and fingering weight, which maybe is the case, or we saw a lot of shrinkage just from the yarn soaking in water for days. Now, wool yarn does change in length. You can tell that from when you block it, and then if you wet something that was blocked, it can snap back and contract. So it's not that this is permanent. Therefore, when the yarn is dry, we'll take a look at the twist and see if it seems like one might be fluffier than the other. But I'm still perplexed. I don't know. I measured shrinkage with platinum sock in my like compare 75-25 sock bases, and I didn't see like this much shrinkage from that kettle dyeing, which I think I also did as a coolish vat start, but I probably wasn't in water for days. But this is weird. I don't have a good explanation. So if you have some insight, please let me know down in the comments because I'm shocked. I'm really, really shocked. I'm coming to you super candid from my patio while my husband puts the kids to bed. I made a mistake, a big mistake. This video I was dyeing micro skeins, not full skeins, but because of the way I had them set up with the zip ties, I thought they were full skeins. I did, and so when I saw the length difference with the full skeins and the micro skeins, I was confused and concerned. Thankfully, it was nothing. I could easily edit this out so that way you guys wouldn't ever know that this happened, but I actually think it's really, really funny, and I am really curious how many of you were shouting at me through the comments or through your screens, Rebecca, they're different sizes because they're not full skeins, as I was running around my house trying to figure this out. So if you figured it out, let me know down in the comments below. But anyway, the yarn is gorgeous. I just took it all out of the spin dryer and hung it up, which is when I noticed that the ties around the yarn was only around a few strands, and I was confused and perplexed. One of the things really hard is just everything looks so dark that it makes it extra hard to know where I need to apply more color. So there's a chance that the final depth will be vastly different between all of our batches. I think that this is one of my favorite colorways that I have ever dyed, ever. It is so dark and moody, but still variegated with these black, gray, purple, and navy tones in the yarn. I am so pleased with my decision to dye this yarn into a medium deep gray base before adding on these other colors. It's hard to capture on camera because the colors are really, really deep, and I've seen things brighter on the monitor than what I see in person at the moment. But you can see we've got some lighter gray patches here in the yarn amidst these deeper blacks, purples, and navies. And part of this occurred because when things are that dark in the pan, all of a sudden everything looks really black. And so it could be hard to do that variation and see where you're placing the colors. And so at some point you just sort of have to trust that they're there. And I would have been disappointed if instead of being this deep gray peeking through, if this were white peeking through. And sometimes white can stand out and be a little more apparent, but if I was trying to cover up white patches that I kept finding, maybe I would have added too much black and then we would have lost the purple and navy in here as well. So, I don't know, I love this yarn and really want to play with this and try to recreate this colorway again someday. I don't know, I'm just drawn to super saturated colors, and I love true black, deep navy, dark navy, and this deep purple. Whatever these three colors are, I love them a lot, and I like to use them as a super dark complement to brights. But you can go variegated and wild with really saturated colors and still create something that has a subtlety to it but is still super beautiful, and I am so proud and thrilled. There's absolutely variation between different batches. This is fingering weight, has more deepness than this particular DK, but I think that there's also some DK patches that look, it's not a fingering versus DK issue. I just picked a group of 10 of each just to show. But either way, I think that this colorway is so fantastic. In this video, we also dyed a few yarn mops. As I was dyeing the yarn, when I had dye powder left on my fingers, I wiped it onto these skeins. And the three of them are pretty different. One of them might have been done separately. One was done with the first round, and then two were done as I was dyeing the next two rounds together. So maybe they had less pigment overall, because the amount of times I was wiping off my gloves, I think was similar for when I was dyeing one skein versus dyeing two. Even though I had two pans going on, I wasn't wiping my gloves off in between doing the navy with the two pans, if that makes sense. But I think that these are fun, and the black, navy, and purple look so good together. Who says that black and navy clash? I mean, besides my grandma when I was little. I actually remember a story of, it was some family event, and she had a navy suit that she wore and a black suit, and she had come to Michigan to stay with us. Maybe it was even my brother's bar mitzvah or something. She brought like her navy jacket with her black pants. And so after that, we labeled the tags navy and black, because when you were pulling dark from the closet, it was hard to tell. But anyway, that's my navy and black story. Now I bring it back to you. Which do you prefer, the deep, deep dark colors, or something with more contrast with our white yarn mops with the pops of these more pigmented colors? I am so in love with this colorway. So, so, so in love. Off camera, I'm gonna go twist these skeins and then start wrapping them up to include in some of these Chanukah samplers. But I really, really hope that you have enjoyed watching me create this colorway. And I'm still so proud whenever something fits in my head. Oh, it's wonderful. But, oh, right, the elephant in the room. It is funny when I forget what type of yarn I'm using in a project and then freak out because I think that it shrunk massively. I'm still very amused by that whole situation and glad I decided to keep it in the video because, hey, it's life and sometimes things happen that you can't explain. Even if you paid it more attention to what you were doing, you should have been able to explain it. But anyway, I love these colors. This was actually one of the first Chanukah episodes that I filmed for 2020, and I had so much fun doing that cool vat technique. One thing I would like to point out is that as I was adding the yarn into the vat, I didn't separate the skeins from one another so that way there could be more movement between them. So that's something that I would recommend if you're going for a more semi-solid coverage versus the tonal that we created. But doing that layer of color was so, so useful for then creating this dark variegated colorway. Tonight might be night 8 of the ChemKnits Chanukah special, but we're not done. There are still 2 bonus Chanukah colorway videos coming out over the next 2 nights, and then finally a vlog where I will bring you behind the scenes into my thought process as I'm designing this project, including some ideas that I didn't use, and my theme for the progression of the colors for all 8 nights. In the vlog, I will also bring you through the actual Chanukah samplers I put together, the packaging, the extras, and all the little details that I made by hand. If you've been opening one of my samplers, please let me know what you thought. I tried to pack a lot of love into them, and I really, really hope that you felt that as you've celebrated Chanukah with me this year. If you enjoyed this series or my videos in general, please subscribe and make sure your notifications are turned on. When you press the bell icon, there's actually a few different options. There's, I think, personalized and then all notifications. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss any new videos, go and select all. Because in addition to special events like this, I publish at least 2 new videos every week. And then we have monthly live streams and unboxings and all kinds of fun stuff along the way. We've had a lot of fun over the course of Chanukah 2020, and we even had a little mystery. I can't believe that I did that. But I think that we created so many beautiful colors, and I am so excited for you to take a look at all of them together. If you're a new or old ChemKnits fan and want to help support the content, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. It's a great way to support me, and there's a lot of really, really cool perks. You can find a link down in the video description. Now, I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to wish all of you a happy Chanukah, happy holidays, and happy new year. We're not done. There's a lot more coming out in 2020, but from the bottom of my heart, I'm wishing you love, light, and laughter this holiday season. Thank you so much for watching.